Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Dram Show with me, Chris Goodrum. Okay, so eagle-eyed viewers will have noticed the t-shirt, and those of you that into American football will obviously know that there is a big game on later on today, or should we say sort of the early hours of the morning. So I shall obviously be cheering on my team and hoping that they win it again. So, but anyway, we're not here really to talk about American football, are we? We're here to talk about whiskey. And as you probably can remember, I tasted a number of expensive and very good bottlings from Mackillop's Choice at Christmas time. And I said at the time that in the new year I would take a look at the other half a dozen that were released at the same time. And I thought, well, now is as good a time as any. I mean, I have got a number of episodes of the show already planned and lined up and ready to go, so to speak, and this was definitely one that I really wanted to do because let's put it this way, you know, the stuff that and as I said at the time, the stuff that Lorne bottles is incredibly mature and incredibly bloody good. So this is going to be another fun episode of the show. So anyway, there's not really a great deal of other information to impart other than it was the final round of the World Whisky Awards on Thursday, so I was in London meeting up with people I tend to meet up once a year at the same event. So just like to say hello to everyone, and yeah, hopefully everybody had a good time. It certainly seemed that way anyway. But anyway, so let's take a look at today's lineup, shall we? Right, okay, so we're going to kick off with the youngest and the least expensive bottling in this flight of 6. This is a Dalian. It was distilled in June of 1998, bottled in September of last year at 57.7%. It's a single bourbon cask, number 9288, and is 19 years old. I don't mind Dalian. Dalian's a bit of a funny malt, I find. It can be kind of classically kind of Speyside, crisp, fresh, somewhat simple, or I've come across some really quite heavily oily versions, and I mean, I don't know enough about the distillery to know if there's a kind of a cut-off point between the two styles, or whether it's just, you know, one of those things. But anyway, Dalian can be a pleasant whiskey, it has to be said. Like I said, it can be fairly innocuous as well. But anyway, so like I said, this is the least expensive bottling in the range, and I think is currently on sale for around about £133. So moving on, second bottling we'll be looking at is a Mortlach, a 20-year-old Mortlach, which was distilled in September of 1997, bottled in September of 2017 from another bourbon cask, number 2977 at 50.2%. Third bottling we'll be looking at is an American oak aged Dalmore. Now again, not seen very often, it has to be said, and generally I think I've only come across it in a couple of independent bottling companies' bottlings, so it's always interesting to see Dalmore in American oak, and some of them can be really, really good. Some, the spirit is a little bit hard work, shall we say, and you think, well, I can see why they use a lot of sherry. But anyway, this particular bottling, it's a 27-year-old. It was distilled in January of 1990, again bottled in September of 2017 from bourbon cask 252 at 54.6, and it's quite expensive, retailing at around about £320. So better be bloody good. Right, the fourth bottling we'll be looking at is well, look at the colour on that, will you? I mean, you probably just remember, I mean, you look at that colour and your first instincts are probably sherry, and you would be wrong. This is I would imagine, a first fill bourbon cask, and the cask number is 14357. It's a 28-year-old Longmorn, which was distilled in October of 1988, bottled in September 2017, and bottled at 60.8%. How? At 28, 60%? I mean, either that was a damn tight cask, which it probably was, I imagine, or there was a lot of water evaporation. I mean, there is this kind of weird thing where, and certainly some of the, this is how stag tends to be sort of way above the minimum casking ABV for bourbon, is that basically the water evaporates off and concentrates the alcohol. I mean, you know, I suppose when you think about it, it's just chemistry at the end of the day. But you really do not expect to see a whisky of this kind of age at that ABV. So anyway, we will see what that one is like. And finally, we're going to look at two peated ones, which is always good fun because I enjoy the peated ones. The first one is a Bowmore, and Mackillop's Choice have obviously bottled some pretty damn good Bowmores over the time, or over the years I should say. And this one is again a single bourbon cask, 4193. It's 25 years old. It was distilled in September of 1992, bottled in September of 2017 at 50.7%. And incidentally, if you wanted to purchase a bottle, it would set you back about 340 quid. So again, better be good. And the last one for today, the second of the peated malts, is a Caol Ila. This is a 26-year-old, distilled in March of 1991, bottled September 2017, from single bourbon cask 4678, and it was bottled at 50.4%. And should you wish to buy one, it's going to set you back about 320 quid. So again, I hope it's going to be bloody good. So that's today's little lineup. Let's kick off with Dalian. Right, okay, so let's see what the nose gives us then, shall we? Quite heavily oiled. It's got some lovely maturity, a little bit of straw-like barley, some baked fruit, apple mainly. There's some oily vanilla. I'm not getting too much sawdusty kind of oak. Doesn't feel quite that mature. It's got a lovely depth. There's a touch of citrus coming through, but it's that lovely kind of straw-like character that is certainly the sort of the main focus of the aromas. Although the oak is now starting to coming through, and I'm starting to get some nice creaminess. And all told, I think the balance on that is absolutely fantastic. I mean, like I said to you, Dalian is never going to be renowned as a majorly complex whisky, but it ages nicely, and if you like sort of mature Speyside whiskies, then certainly this is going to tick your boxes, so to speak. There's a little bit of herbalness coming through now, a sort of, not quite mint, but sort of in that kind of sort of almost minty kind of leafy herbal kind of note. Anyway, let's see what the barrel gives us. Quite woody on the palate, a lot more oak, coffee, a little bit of cocoa powder, quite tannic, but the tannins are very soft and they're a bit drying, but it's got some lovely citrus. It's got some barley, some oily fruit that kind of, again, balances it up quite nicely. Slightly straw-like, a little bit of creamy oak kind of coming through on the finish, but all the while that sort of alcohol-enhanced tannin is certainly sort of noticeable on the edge of the palate. But it's got a lovely length, and yeah, I think that's an impressive bottling. Okay, so let's move on to the Mortlach. Let's see what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? Quite light, not slightly high-toned. lime, lemon, some barley, a little bit of burnt wood possibly. Certainly quite herbaceous. There's a lot of kind of almost mixed herbs kind of character, sort of thyme and marjoram, and maybe bay leaf, that kind of herbal notes. Not a huge amount of oak. The oak is pretty minimal, it has to be said, which is what's allowing all the sort of what appears to be spirit character kind of coming through. Again, like barley, not as full and rich as some Mortlachs I've come across, but still, you know, it's a pleasant nose. It's really nice. A little bit of tangerine possibly now. Let's see what the pal's like. That's lovely. Luscious, honeyed, soft, a little bit touch of citrus, a little bit of tangerine, lemon, plenty of barley, a little bit more oak. That is all really nicely sort of put together, nicely matured. There's that sort of little bit of almost kind of straw-like barley kind of coming through. Again, not a huge amount of oak. The oak is quite sort of restrained, and it's very much sort of like spirit orientated. And although the palate is a little bit fuller than the nose would suggest, it's certainly not the richest and deepest of Mortlachs I've ever come across. But it's got charm. It's got some lovely honeyed character. It's got some length. I think that's, again, a lovely bottle. Okay, so let's move on to the Dalmore. Let's see what the nose gives us on this thing, shall we? There's a bit of an edginess to it, and I can't say I'm totally surprised by that. Dalmore, like I said, in American oak, does have that kind of character, but it's not kind of an unpleasant edginess. It's a sort of kind of agave tequila-y pulped white fruit kind of character. There's a little acerbicness to it, it has to be said, which I often tend to find in tequila anyway, but again, it's not what I would say is particularly unpleasant. There's a little bit of barley, there's some pleasantly mature oak, just a bit coffeed oak rather than sort of sawdusty oak. A touch of vanilla. I'm getting a little bit of sweet, sort of buttery notes kind of coming through, along with a little bit sweeter barley as well. In actual fact, I think as it's sort of like in the glass, it seems to be kind of opening up a little bit more, and I'm certainly getting a lot more barley character and a lot more citrus. And yeah, I kind of like this. I mean, I like it for two reasons. One, I think it's obviously a good spirit, and the second, it's another one of those classic examples of finding, you know, a whiskey that is more often than not aged in sherry casks and just getting beneath the surface of the sherry. You know, I think it's fascinating. A bit like you know, last week's not last week's, but you know, a bit like some of the Macallans you can get. I was thinking of last week's Macallan, but of course last week's Macallan was a first film, Oak Sherry Monster. Anyway, back to this. Yeah. So yeah, this is kind of interesting, and you know, if you're a big Dalmore fan and you've never had a sort of an American oak aged Dalmore, if you've only ever had these sort of distillery sherry releases, then definitely worth trying, I think. Anyway, let's see what the palate's like. Again, edgy, but the oak and the barley kind of offset that to a certain extent. A little bit of coffee, touch more oak on the middle, some drying coffee tannins, little sort of kind of Sauvignon Blanc-y kind of herbal finish to it, actually, has to be said. It was almost kind of cat pee, you know, but I know that doesn't sound particularly appealing, but if you're a Sauvignon Blanc drinker, you'll kind of get the reference. Again, it kind of ties in with that sort of slightly acerbic agave kind of character, and the fact that sort of, well, Dalmore can be a little bit on the rough side, which this one obviously is because it's Dalmore, but it has plenty of other things going on. It's got the sweetness of the barley, it's got the fruit, which kind of balances it quite nicely. So again, it's typical American oak-aged Dalmore, and well, yes, you'd have to part with 320 quid to obviously experience that, but if you can get a cheaper bottling, but I mean, even if you can get this one, I mean, if you've got deep pockets, then, well, nothing wrong with this one at all, in my opinion. Right, okay, on to the incredibly alcoholic Longmorn. Ideally, I probably would have put a drop of water with it, but I don't think I'm really going to have enough left after that. But anyway, after I taste it, but so, ooh, pardon me, Vicar. Right, okay, so let's move on to the rather alcoholic Longmorn. Now, would you be surprised if I said this is quite oaky? Well, it is actually. What a surprise. Sort of woody, treacle, burnt wood, almost kind of rye-like herbs. If I'd have tasted this blind, I would be pretty clueless as to what distillery this came from. I mean, it's a really big oak monster, and it's actually quite surprising because most of Lorne's bottlings, like I said, tend to be incredibly well balanced, and so far they've all been amazingly well balanced. This although it's not a bad whiskey by any stretch of the imagination, but it's a real oak monster. I mean, there isn't much. I mean, I'm not getting any barley, I'm not getting any kind of Longmorn character, I'm just getting kind of treacly, sort of dense kind of oak. So yeah, okay, it is what it is. So let's see what the palate's like, shall we? Drying, slightly bitter finish, but it's got some lovely kind of tangerine kind of notes right on the finish. Again, lots of bourbon character. I'm getting corn and rye, coffee, chocolate, tannins. Again, a lovely whiskey, but there's no balance there whatsoever. No distillery character, virtually zero spirit character as well. It is all about the oak, and very clean oak it is, and very oaky oak it is. So, you know, if you love that kind of style of whiskey, which there are a number of you that do, then shelling out 350 quid. Yeah, okay. I personally don't think I would be putting that kind of money down to purchase that particular bottling, but can't argue with the quality. The quality is absolutely superb, and again, because it's very oaky, I don't get a feeling of age. It just certainly doesn't say 28 to me, it has to be said. I mean, maybe I would have said mid-teens possibly, but again, with all that kind of oak, it's just very difficult to tell. But yeah, like I said, quality of the whiskey is well, quality of the bottling is very impressive. So anyway, let's move on. Right, okay, so let's move on to the Bowmore. So, like I've said in the past, probably at the beginning of the video, Lorna's bottled some stunning old Bowmores, it has to be said. And as you well know, I'm a bit of a sucker for an old Bowmore, so let's see what those gives us on this end, shall we? Quite medicinal, dusty as well, you know, lovely dusty mature peat. Briny, oily, fishy. Less of the violets. It's like I said, it's more of the kind of fishy, kind of salty style of Bowmore that you can get quite readily. Wonderfully deep. I mean, that is just absolutely stunning. I mean, I would have certainly, I mean, if they hadn't bottled that 93 Ardbeg, I would have probably gone for this, because it's absolutely lovely. I mean, it's not quite classic old Bowmore in that sort of old, dusty, violety kind of character. Like I said, it's more in the sort of like the fishy, salty kind of Bowmore, which is, you know, equally as valid. A little bit of lemon kind of coming through now. It's getting slightly oily, citrusy kind of thing happening. It's, yeah, I mean, this is just an absolutely stunning nose at the end of the day. You know, it doesn't matter where it actually comes from. I mean, this is wonderfully complex. There's a little bit of milky oak kind of coming through now. Stunning, absolutely stunning. Let's see what the palate's like. Why, it's bloody good. Lots of dusty, sooty peat, coal dust. I mean, that is a real dusty peat monster, it has to be said. Again, not much in the sort of violety kind of style. Again, sort of quite fishy and oily and salty, and wow, that sort of dusty peat is kind of lingering. That's got a lot of peat kind of character, and I mean, this obviously, you know, dates back to sort of like, you know, 1992, when for me Bowmore was certainly a little bit more, or the spirits was certainly a bit more wild and woolly, should we say, as opposed to today's slightly more politer version. And oh, it's got some stunning length. I'm just getting lingering peat, you know, that sort of briquette kind of peat that was the terminology I use anyway. That sort of compacted peat, if you see what I mean, with that sort of wonderful oiliness and a little bit of tar. You know, it's just sort of, oh, God, that's good. And finally, let's have a look at the 26-year-old Caol Ila. Let's see what those gives us on this one, shall we? Oh, that's deep. That's really quite fruity by Caol Ila standards. It's got that sort of unsweetened pineapple, apricot, tangerine, lime, no, not lime, lemon. Again, some light fish oils. It's kind of classic, old school, crisp Caol Ila with some age. And I've come across Caol Ilas like this on numerous occasions, and God, I love that. That is just absolutely, like I say, absolutely stunning. Caol Ila just ages magnificently, and you know, sometimes you kind of forget that. I mean, because, you know, you get so used to seeing Caol Ila bottled when it's very, very young, you just kind of forget about how good it can be and how it ages. I mean, and this is absolutely fantastic. I mean, real sort of sootiness to the peat, real subtlety to the peat. We're not talking the sort of the quite the level of peat of, say, the Bowmore. little bit of chocolate kind of coming through now. The oak is just starting to creep in. But again, I mean, you know, classic classic Caol Ila. Again, very unoaked, shall we say, and you very rarely come across Caol Ila that has an awful lot of oak kind of character. It's all about the wonderful spirit character, and this is absolutely no different. So let's see what the palate gives us. Wonderfully peppery finish. Pepper, peat, a little bit of menthol, eucalyptus, that kind of character right on the very finish. Kind of almost sinus clearing, but very subtle, and quite a bit more peat on the palate than there was on the nose, with that sort of, you know, slightly sort of earthy, edgy, dusty kind of peat character, with a little bit of an astringency, a little bit of coastal character, a little bit of fish, oils. That is absolutely stunning, it has to be said. Okay, so let's sum today's episode of the show up. The Dalian, yeah, well, you know, like I said, it certainly had depth. It was not probably the most complex of Speyside whiskies, but then Dalian never actually is. But still, I think that was, you know, pleasantly mature. Had a lot of going on for it. Certainly, no issues with that one at all. The Mortlach, again, a good Mortlach. Maybe not quite so rich and dense as some, maybe a little bit more citric and crisp, but still, yeah, a lovely whiskey. The Dalmore, well, yeah, I mean, Lorna's kind of bottled, I think, 2 or 3 casks of Dalmore now, and like I said, it's an interesting insight into the distillery and the actual style of the whiskey itself. And like I said, it's a bit rough at the edges, it has to be said. It's a bit like sort of Glendronach in American oak, or Glengoyne in American oak. Some, you know, these other distilleries have a tendency to use sherry for a good reason, in my opinion. The Longmorn, okay, so 350 quid, and I couldn't justify that at all, it has to be said. I mean, it's not bad whiskey, it's just a bit one-dimensional, and you know, at the end of the day, you know, the Mackillop's Choice is an independent bottling company like every other independent bottling company, and they have their hits and they have their misses. And although I would say that I have never tasted a bad whiskey, you know, poor quality whiskey that's been bottled under the Mackillop's Choice labelling, there have been 1 or 2 that I have an issue with, and this just happens to fall into that particular category. It's just a little bit sort of unbalanced and just too much oak. But you know, like I said, there's people that like that kind of stuff. The Bowmore, like I said, bloody good. I mean, yes, 340 quid, but well, I think that's worth absolutely every penny of it. You know, you just know that old Bowmores are going to cost you, you know, a fair amount of money. It's just the way of these things. It's like old Ardbegs and old Macallans, you know. They are expensive casks to buy, which I damn well know that they are bloody expensive casks to buy, and hence the bottle price is expensive. But if that's the sort of level, and you have that kind of level of disposable income for a bottle of whiskey, then you can't go too far wrong with that particular one. And the Caol Ila, like I said, classic, old school, mature Caol Ila, that sort of crisp, fresher kind of character, as opposed to the slightly more modern, oilier style that is coming out of the distillery these days. But either way, it's still exceptionally good. So just before we go, I would like to say a really very, very big thank you to Angus Dundee and to Mackillop's Choice for, again, you know, these samples. they don't have to do this kind of thing, but I'm pleased that they do. So anyway, there you are. That's this week's episode of the show in the bag. Next week we'll be doing something a little bit different. But until then, good afternoon and good dramming.
Попробую начать с чистого листа. Ты просто знай, что я теперь не та.